Alright guys, how's it going? I'm back again, sooner than most of you probably expected. Basically speaking, my Twitter feed is filled with tech and to a lesser extent science news, and this is pretty much how I keep up to date with current tech events. And with AMD's Lisa Su taking the stage for yet another keynote, this time at Computex, I figured it might be worth watching in my attempts to get back up to speed with the goings on in the tech world. 17 minutes of uninteresting laptop talk later simply served to reinforce my understanding of why tech enthusiasts are at their lowest enthusiasm level in many years. But thankfully, we did get something of interest in the second half of the presentation, and that was the first official information and benchmark of AMD's Zen 4 and the Ryzen 7000 series. For most of us, the big news was obviously the performance, or perhaps a lack of performance, shown with the upcoming Ryzen chip. And it's safe to say that many in the Twitter crowd were not impressed, with comments such as Zen 4 is dead on arrival, and claims of fanboys reaching marvellous levels of copium. I will reserve my judgment on that for the release. However, there was something in this tweet which sparked a flame of memory. It was the first sentence. Zen 4 is a Zen 3 port to N5 TSMC 5nm with just enough changes to make AVX 512 fit. On reading this the first time, I realised I already had most of the information on Zen 4 over 2 years ago. And that info actually came in my Zen 3 exclusive video from way back in April 2020, just as COVID was threatening to become a serious worldwide problem. It's safe to say that this video of mine kinda flew under the radar. People would still much rather talk about Zen 2, of course. However, the information in this video was basically spot on, and I'll just run over it now. Starting from the top, Zen 3 2020. Now, I did say basically spot on, and of course COVID threw everything off by a year, which I did actually note in this video would probably happen. 2 threads per core, that's rather obvious. Now this next one though, only 10% to 15% single-threaded IPC increase over Zen 2. At first glance, that appears to be off. However, this was very early information, which I later updated in June to around 20% faster in gaming. And as you know, AMD claimed a 19% Zen 3 IPC uplift versus Zen 2. And the most likely reason for my initial numbers being low is that AMD hadn't actually added gaming results to their gains at this point. And this is actually backed up by this slide, which clearly shows around about 10 to 12% IPC gain in applications on the left, with most of the higher results coming in gaming at the right. Now you can see this more clearly now that I've highlighted the applications with the yellow box and the games with the blue box. The average IPC uplift over these 9 yellow applications is 13.66%, and the average for the games is 22.8%. And I actually checked through the tech press as well, and Hardware Unboxed got numbers that were very close to this. They actually scored Zen 3's application IPC uplift around 12%, and the gaming performance uplift by 20%. Now for me that's pretty convincing, and a reasonable explanation for why my IPC numbers appeared to be a bit low. But some of you might not be satisfied with that conclusion. The thing here is though, the single most important aspect of any leak, the thing that makes it legit, is when the information is specific and exact. So getting on with this next part, the double L3 cache size, we already saw evidence of that, and that was in this crazy leaked video on YouTube, which I actually covered in this video, the Tech Talk 6 AMD Milan info. AMD actually had already shown a slide, which wasn't meant to be for public domain, showing that the old Zen 2 setup was changing with Milan. My source was the first to confirm that this 8-core CCX and doubled cache was real. In other words, Zen 3 had removed the cross-CCX latency penalty which plagued Zen 1 and Zen 2 in gaming. The next part though is where you should really be sitting up and paying attention. This is where I claimed that the L3 latency of Zen 3 will actually increase to 47 cycles compared to only 40 in Zen 2. Nobody else had this information. Nobody. And nobody else could even have considered this as being a factor. And there's an interesting story here which I can now tell you, given how long it's been since I got this leak. you can see that I have used the figures of 40 cycles in Zen 2 and 47 cycles in Zen 3. But in fact, the true latency figures for both are 39 cycles for Zen 2 and 46 cycles for Zen 3. So why then did I use 40 and 47? This one's actually really easy. It's because my source asked me to do that. And the reason was, Wikichip, the website, used 40 cycles for Zen 2 instead of the proper 39 cycles. So we had a chat and decided that I would add 7 cycles to this 40 rather than the 39. And I will do stuff like that as a matter of course, just to protect my sources. Now moving on, and all this stuff about the power improvements and the new ISA and security features. I guess you could have guessed at that, but again, it was all true. And then there was the rather unspecific information about the increased boost frequency, which in fact a lot of people missed, because if you recall, Zen 3 had the same base clocks as Zen 2, and a very small increase to the boost frequencies. Once again, spot on. Now sadly we never found any evidence if Milan A0 Silicon was actually sampling with no SMT, as far as I know at least. But we do know that when Zen 3 launched, it launched as B0 Silicon in October. In short, you look at this entire picture here and it is very, very clear that the information I was given was correct. There's no way you can make guesses like this, and get it all right. Alright Jim, but what has this got to do with Zen 4? Well, like I said, this video kinda flew under the radar. To be blunt, the information was pretty unexciting. But in the end, that is what Zen 3 was. All of this here. And given the timing, I guess I can forgive most people for forgetting that this video also had the first real information on Zen 4. So here it is again, in its entirety, from this video. Zen 4, 2021. Based on what you just heard, that could be a fluid date. It's a 5nm derivative of Zen 3. No surprises there, we already knew that. IPC will be improved again, but we would expect that. DDR5, we've long since assumed that, but this one is new. 1 meg of L2. 1 meg of L2 per core, so perhaps a switch to this dense 5nm will allow for latencies to remain low even at a doubling of the size. And another new one, which was long speculated on for Zen 3, has been confirmed for Zen 4, AVX512. And stuff like the new socket we already knew about. Now again, Zen 4 2021, it's a year out because of COVID. 5nm derivative of Zen 3, literally anybody could have guessed that. Improved IPC, extremely unspecific, but AMD didn't know themselves at this point. And DDR5, again, we all knew that was coming. However, the telling information here is of course the increase from 512 kilobytes to 1 megabyte of L2 per core, which Lisa confirmed at Computex. From what I can tell, AVX512 still hasn't officially been confirmed by AMD yet. However, you know that I've been saying this for over 2 years now, and again in my last video when I was talking about Turin having true AVX512, Turin being Zen 4 of course. There was, however, in July last year, a leaked document from AMD which clearly shows that AVX512 is there in the CPU. And there you have it. Twitter has been melting down for the past couple of days for no reason whatsoever. As anyone who watched this video should have known pretty much exactly what was coming with Zen 4. It is a derivative of Zen 3 on TSMC's 5nm. IPC will have increased, but probably not by the 19% that we saw with Zen 2. The major IPC increase likely only comes from this doubling of L2 per core. And in fact, when I asked my source about this, way back in 2020, they told me the current estimates on IPC gains for Zen 4 are even less than Zen 3. Getting back to Twitter, and there was indeed a fair amount of copium going around, with one set of fans claiming dead on arrival. Of course, another set will claim sandbagging, with some suggesting that AMD is even sandbagging on clock speeds, even though they showed a demo, a gaming demo, of the chip running at 5.52 GHz, while yet others said they're sandbagging on IPC. As you've seen already, If AMD is indeed sandbagging on IPC, it's likely because they haven't added any gaming results to their benchmarks yet, and gaming could see a similar increase. But, to be blunt, I really wouldn't expect that, because the major increase in the gaming results for Zen 3, that came from the removal of Zen 2's cross-CCX penalty. As I said, Zen 4 likely only has a doubled L2 to rely on, and that's really only another 4MB of cache for an 8-core CPU. So is Zen 4 dead on arrival? Or are AMD sandbagging? The answer to that, we probably won't know for a few months yet. As I've been suggesting, and as my source suggested, the expectations of seeing around 20% IPC gains again doesn't seem to be on the cards this time. Will we see much higher than 5.5 GHz? I really don't think so, but that is just a pure guess. What I do think though, and again, this is mostly speculation at this point, is that yes, AMD are sandbagging, but not in the two ways you've just heard. So if it's not IPC and it's not clock speeds, there's really only one thing left. And there was one more thing I was told in my Zen 4 information, right at the bottom. More cores per socket. It's important to understand that Zen 4 is the CPU core, which will be used in numerous CPU products, from laptops to servers. Clearly, more cores are desirable in servers, and I fully expect to see an increase in core count there. But there is no guarantee that we'll see an increase on the desktop or in laptops, as that is almost certainly down to whether or not Intel can compete. We've already seen leaks of future Intel products with huge numbers of E-cores, those little atom cores. So my guess would be at some point AMD will be forced to release consumer Zen 4 products with more than just 16 cores. So I feel that if they are sandbagging, this is where they're doing it. And you shouldn't really be surprised by this because they did the exact same thing with Zen 2. Lisa demoed the 8-core chip up against the 9900K, and then she held up the package, clearly showing room for another Zen 2 chiplet. Looking at the Computex presentation, she again held up a Ryzen package, but this time with 2 Zen 4 chiplets as she demoed the 16-core chip. It is possible that Zen 4 has 12 cores per chiplet, and what we were shown were 2 cut down chiplets. Or there may be room in a different package to fit another 1 or 2 chiplets. And that point itself is interesting to discuss because, and remember, I've been out of the loop for some time. At Computex, Lisa gave us confirmation that this Ryzen she showed has integrated graphics in the I/O die, which for me makes it a graphics chiplet rather than an I/O die. But anyway, clearly the iGPU is taking up a fair bit of space on that I/O die, and it may well be that future Ryzen products with 24 or even 32 cores could be seen, perhaps with a separate I/O die, without the integrated graphics. It goes without saying, that last part was just pure speculation, but I feel it's as good a guess as any right now. And right, I'm done with this one, but something tells me we haven't heard the last of, nor will this be the last time you hear me talking about Zen 4. And I noticed 1 or 2 little things during the presentation that might make a video over the next few days, if I can get around to it. Otherwise, I'll be back whenever anything takes my interest again, and you'll be the first to know about it. I'll catch you later, guys.